I want to shift now to the World Association, WACE, which I do hope you're members of, and if not, I do hope you'll consider being members of. And Saskia has been a long-standing supporter as one of our networks of WACE, because we are a network of networks. And very pleased to have Saskia as an ongoing member and supporting what we're trying to achieve across WACE. What we wanted to do last year was to look at quality frameworks around the world, because there are a number of jurisdictions that have quality frameworks to develop them. I've just been talking about the Canadian one. So we took a look at the range of quality frameworks, and because we wanted to see if we could develop a global one that could be malleable enough to fit into different contexts and be appropriate for whatever the context was. So we wanted a framework to develop a global one. We wanted it to help guide those institutions and organizations where, for example, they might not be part of an association like Saskia. They may not have that guidance or support, but this would give them something to work with. We used the national associations like Saskia and others to inform our work, and we also, of course, looked at the literature. So the guiding principles for work integrated learning, so similarly to what I've already talked about, they're structured to positively impact all students, they're centered on student learning, they're evaluated regularly, equitable and effective and consistent, and they're accessible to all students and appropriate external partners and programs work to removing barriers. Those are some guiding principles of good quality will. This slide you cannot read, but I'm assuming these slides are going to be shared, but this gives you some of the literature that was used to develop this quality will framework. And it is, by the way, on the WACE website. So if you go to the WACE website and look at it, you'll find the full quality framework and the references you could read there and connect into what we're doing and see if you have any comments about it. It'd be lovely to see that. Because what we are, as I mentioned, WACE is a network of networks, and it's all about members and people who are engaging with us to help us provide a global community of practitioners and researchers in work integrated learning, connecting these various networks together, add value-added programming for our members, networking, professional development, workshops, and events. There's also a connection to the International Journal of Work Integrated Learning, and of course this our Global Will modules, which is professional development for will.
It's just concluded now. We're left with some few, maybe a minute or so. But the gist of the presentation is the framework and what is required in the framework. I mean, already from Melazel, NSA, she mentioned very important elements to say the evaluation on the South African will then assist us then to develop a policy framework. I know that some work was done previously, but now there's been an evaluation. Where are the gaps and what is it that is required to do? That will help us. And what I also like about one of the recommendation is the will lead organization at the policy level. Already we have Saskia and others, but then particularly at policy level, it will help. And from Dr. Nora, it's more about quality. As much as we spoke of quality learnerships, quality apprenticeship, so there has to be quality, and she mentioned all of the elements that will, of course, lead us to quality. That is, articulate your aims properly, accomplish your actions, and assess your achievements. And the dedication of resources. This is where sometimes our institutions fail to say, we have good intentions, but we do not dedicate resources, right from at the principal level up until the last person. So these are important things to note. We have the two last presenters, panel members, who I will allocate 5 minutes. And today, Mlochwa, you have set me up. You said I must cut down the time for speakers. But then you did not tell me unintended consequences I couldn't with the online ones. or Mr. Naidu is the online speaker. He's here. Let me have thought. He's already ready. Okay. Have you, Mr. Naidu? Welcome. We are under pressure of time. I hope that you could cut your time in half. We still have one more other speaker after yours. Thank you very much, my chief, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair of the session, Dr. T, and good afternoon to all of the participants. So I talk fast, but I will talk much faster today. So I was asked to actually respond to Dr. McRae's presentation, looking particularly at quality standards for wool in South Africa and beyond. Now, we should understand that in South Africa, we do not have a homogeneous education system. We have three different sub-frameworks, the higher education and then the occupational qualification sub-framework. And a lot of the discussion around wool has been happening in the higher education space for a long time. So I just want to bring in where the QCTO and the occupational qualifications fits in and its relationship to work integrated learning. Now, those who know or those who do not know, the occupational qualifications that are developed by the QCTO comprises three components: a knowledge component, a practical component, and a workplace experience component. And those three components are essential before you are able to take an external assessment. Now, I want to link that very quickly to the PAIR model that was presented by Dr. McRae. Our knowledge modules that we talk about would link to the pedagogy, what the learner is being taught. The practicals in our side is a bit flexible. It could be part of experience at the institution or at the workplace. And then obviously the experience, which is the work integrated learning. And then she spoke about the assessment. We have the external integrated summative assessment. I think the point that Dr. McRae was making was that the assessment must be linked to the outcomes of the qualification. And most certainly in our model, the external integrated summative assessment is looking at how does the learner display the competencies associated with the outcomes of the qualification. So in a nutshell, within the QCTO itself, we have actually integrated learning into the system so that it's not an add-on, but it becomes built into the system. Certainly we agree that with Dr. McRae's summation that it's a three-way partnership between an educational institution, the workplace, or she called it the host organization, and the student. And obviously in our context, it could be our TVET colleges, our CET colleges, our universities, some entity that takes care of work placements, and IDs, CETAs are best suited for that and is part of their mandate, and then obviously it's a student. So there's a lot of synergy with what she's actually said. Now, I think the issues around the standards, and again I want to agree with her that it gives students more hands-on experience, application of theory in practice, which leads to employability. For government, it is going to be a win-win if they could convert more resources to such an endeavor, because it's certainly going to address the unemployment rate, and in South Africa we know how critical that is. And closing the skills gap, as well as economic development and productivity. So work integrated learning, if properly implemented, will tick all of those boxes. Let me go quickly to the other question, which I had to respond to, was looking at it, in terms of South Africa and beyond. Now, obviously that starts to become a bit more of a difficult task. But I think that the best way to start to think about work integrated learning for a particular country, and then in terms of extending it to to Africa and then even internationally, is to somehow locate work-integrated learning within the qualification frameworks that are being developed. Now, certainly we can, and as I said, WOL is already integrated into our framework. We are in discussions with countries, let's say our regional countries, SADC. We have a South African Development Cooperation Qualifications Framework, which wants to address issues of mobility and compatibility of qualifications. And certainly work-integrated learning can become a component of those discussions so that work-integrated learning can be then established at a regional level. We know we have the Africa-wide qualifications network. It can be taken, even to that level. And I'm not saying we should discount that there's one country that could liaise directly with the international. That's not what I'm saying. But we can start to conceptualize it. Regions and broader regions. And we have to locate this as a critical feature of our qualifications framework. The discussions we've been having with our neighboring countries, as I said, has been on developing what are the core sets of standards that underpin any occupation or trade. And if there's agreement on a common set of standards, and then each country applies it, but applies a common set of core standards, then the issue of recognition and mobility, etc., becomes that much more easier. And I think it gives us a good platform or a lens at which to look at work-integrated learning. Certainly the principles that have been provided by Dr. McRae, although they sound, fairly simple, I want to endorse how critical they are, but that we need to properly interrogate those and how they are implemented at different levels, and how it contributes to a quality work-integrated learning framework. And then my parting thought, Chair, is work-integrated learning a necessity, or is it a add-on in the education and training space? And I want to argue that it is a necessity in the education and training enterprise if we want to add real value, and then obviously which leads to the issues of our students being much more employable, addressing the issues of unemployment, and the other ills that not only South Africa faces, but I think the rest of the world. Thank you, Chair.
Round of applause. Powerful parting shot. Is it a necessity or an add-on? I think this has been an argument in the university space. University colleagues will know that they're starting to grapple with that question. But the real challenges on the ground is the very graduates are struggling, and the employers are saying we have issues. So it is indeed a necessity. Let's give it then to our last panel member, the CEO of PSETA. These are very critical institutions for work-integrated learning. Over to you, Madam Potter.
Thank you, Program Director. Colleagues, good afternoon. And firstly, thank you to SASCI for this opportunity to present. And interestingly, the QCTO CEO has left us with a good parting shot. And my task was to respond to Dr. McRae's presentation from a SETA perspective. And we share the same perspective as the QCTO. It is indeed a necessity. And the very fact that I see a lot of TVET colleges and University of Technologies here, and the absence of universities in terms of graduate internships, particularly within the public service sector, tells us a lot about how work-integrated learning is considered here in South Africa. So my response to Dr. McRae's presentation will be structured as follows. Firstly, contextualizing and situating work-integrated learning in South Africa. And then my comments on setting quality standards. As a SETA, we have the term authority in our name. So we are not merely funders of work-integrated learning. We too look for quality standards when it comes to, well, So why do we need quality standards? I'd like to believe that all of us here as educators, policymakers, practitioners, and employers are all concerned about educational preparation for work. Well, the systems, the pedagogy are all important considerations when we think about today's topic, challenges and solutions for the 21st century. But I submit, when we think about will, we cannot do so without thinking about the labor market and labor market outcomes. Conferences such as this foreground why we need to continually think about integrating work and learning. I think we've become so used to using will, we forget about the integration component. Employers increasingly want more and more from employees. We see this every day as CETAs, being the mediators between employers and educational institutions. Individuals continue to pursue qualifications, and employers have increasingly used these qualifications as proxy indicators of competence. So what we have now is qualification inflation, and the pursuance of what human capital theory, for those of you all that have studied economics, tells us. Study more, you'll be more productive, you will eventually get a job, which is not the case in South Africa. Employers want to succeed, learners want to thrive, but intentions do not equal execution. And this is particularly so when we look at will outcomes. What happens to our learners after they have gone through a work-integrated learning program? We've heard from Dr. McRae's presentation that will is contextualized quite differently. For example, in South Africa, we've got various stakeholders. The NSA made a presentation. The DHET has made an attempt with things such as your workplace-based learning program regulations to try and define and give us terminology in terms of what is work-integrated learning. However, it still continues to be quite a contested concept. Employers are confused, it differs from sector to sector, and interestingly from institution to institution. Based on our practical experience as the public service SETA, we see this varying and diverse understanding from employers within the sector. Usually when they think about will in the public service, it's labeled for TVET learners and University of Technology learners. Aspects of internships and candidacy programs are seen as developmental programs. They do not fall within the ambit of will. But again, going back to the issue of terminology, if we really understand work-integrated learning to be exactly that, why are internships not considered that? So what we have is a conflation of what work-integrated learning is expected to achieve with NQF levels and qualifications. And what ends up happening is that we have stakeholders working in this ecosystem that are all participants within work-integrated learning, now privileging internships over your TVET will or UOT will. The public service sector is a case in point. They are happy to host learners that are doing their TVET will, but they will not absorb TVET will learners. They will always privilege graduates from higher education institutions. Another concept that Dr. McRae spoke to was employability. I'd like to expand it slightly further to talk about employability skills. I think we agree is about building, education rather is about building knowledge and expertise. But the ways in which it relates to the workplace is quite complex, and the ways in which it relates to occupations is complex. We need to ask ourselves about what is this ideology we seek with work-integrated learning? And I do not mean ideology in its negative sense, but rather, are we practicalizing this ideology that work-integrated learning is supposed to provide us? We do have challenges. Some of them are basic, but still critical. Challenges such as lack of intention, poor leadership, and poor teaching cultures and abilities in employer organizations. There was a discussion earlier on about, are employers teachers? Do they really know what to do when you receive a student to do work-integrated learning? I'll be honest, I always say no, I don't want an intern when it comes to my particular office because I simply do not have the time. Employers are there to meet profit margins. They're really not there to train our learners. So there's no focused intention to implement and make it work. Learners are hosted, most of the time poorly managed, boxes are ticked, and BEE scorecards are achieved. Look, if interns are managed well, why is it that the hiring rate is so paltry? Why do we have graduate unemployment? Why do we have huge amount of TVET learners sitting without employment? So, based on this contextualization and what transpires with WIL, the argument for quality standards cannot be overstated. But the question is, what does quality mean? I think the framework that's been presented in terms of the AAA framework provides us with some critical notions that we need to contend with. One of those means getting a common negotiated meaning for what work-integrated learning is in South Africa, agreeing on terminology, setting standards for what it means to integrate learning with knowledge, and bringing along all the stakeholders as noted in Dr. McRae's presentation. As I conclude, I'd like to foreground something that was brought up in the presentation, the issue of curriculum. I'd like to emphasize this, as we often expect WIL to deliver competence without sufficiently considering the body of knowledge associated with it. So when we look at a quality framework, I stress that we must look at the disciplinary knowledge associated. Otherwise, we are really not utilizing WIL as a necessity, but not as an add-on. Remember, we are preparing individuals for occupations. Aspects of occupational identity and professional agency are critical notions that affect an individual and affect society at large. WIL should be approached as a pathway to practicalizing what we call powerful knowledge. Additionally, quality standards require that we adhere to these standards, whether you are a SETA, a TVET college, or an employer. I must also emphasize that as one of the 21 SETAs that fund a variety of work-integrated learning programs, we find glaring disparities in terms of implementation. TVET colleges tasked with monitoring often don't monitor. They don't adhere to their own quality standards. These are the realities we need to think about. Learners don't understand their logbook and the tasks they need to meet. Again, aspects we need to think about when we're looking at quality standards. As I conclude, we often hear this notion of South Africa having good policies and frameworks, and the issue being implementation. I'm not here to argue one side or the other on that. But what's become apparent so far from our discussions here today is that we do need the quality standards, and us sitting in this room need to be the advocates of such quality standards. My caution as I end is, as we develop our framework, and I'm looking at my NSA colleague or boss, should I say, our own framework for work-integrated learning, let us be realistic. Let us be realistic of our content, our context, as well as be reflective of the importance of work-integrated learning within the post-school education and training system, and most importantly, its role in preparing individuals for work. Thank you, Program Director.
A big round of applause for all the presenters, the panel members. Ntate Naidoo came, took it to another level in terms of regionalization of WIL standards, which is quite important. Dr. Nora spoke of international benchmarking, where we should be, the work that is being done, beautiful framework. And so Quality Council for Trades and Occupation is quite key. And also spoke of a common set of standards in across the neighboring countries and principles that will, of course, guide that. And one of the biggest SETAs is PSETA. So they're also coming and say, WIL is a necessity, and we must never forget the labor market. And by the way, as I say, PSETA is one of the biggest because public sector is the biggest employer. So it's important. The point that have been raised are very, very important. And You left us with number of critical questions. I will actually not go back to those questions. But at this stage, let me then, I'm not sure, Program Director, it looks like there's no time for questions. Oh.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Maswanga, moderator for this session. In fact, we have answered all the questions that were supposed to be asked. We already taken 26 minutes more than what I allocated. It's very difficult to manage time with very knowledgeable people like this, but we must also finish the program, especially when others are online, it will be very difficult. I know they are itching to answer questions, but it will be a problem because questions are going to take another 30 minutes. So all other speakers that are still coming, they want to be listened to. Let me apologize to my, in the commissions that are going to run parallel, they are going to participate there, right? Yeah, so thank you very much. Your names are very difficult. Grumbeck, no, Graham Porter. But thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much, colleagues. You did very well. Thank you so much. We will try to push. Kunzima ukuthetha abantu abadala abathethiseki uyabona kufanele uvele usasuthula ikakhulukazi laba online are already planned their times accordingly. Now we're going to go to plenary 5. We will manage at the end. We will manage time. Remember, we still have the gala dinner at the end. So we have a little bit of a buffer between the end of sessions and the gala dinner. So I think we can play around the time a little bit, but we will get time to rest as well. Remember that in terms of this program, it was supposed to end at 4 or 16:05. Then the gala dinner will start at 19 hours. We will try to at least to use that buffer, but let's continue to manage time properly. Let us be try to be concise in our presentations so that we also allow others to get time to speak. Let me then invite Dr. Sherry Lloyd, to come and moderate this coming session. You also have 30 minutes, ma'am, to conclude with all your 3 speakers. I hope you will be able to manage that. Thank you very much. Let's give her a big round of applause. Let's encourage her so that she's concise. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you very much, as if Kaizer Chiefs have won a cup.
Thank you very much, Program Director. And yes, I'll be very quick. I actually have 2 speakers in this session, and then there's a different moderator for the next plenary, and then the questions and the panel will happen after both plenary 5 and 6. So it's 2:30 now. By 3 o'clock, we will be through this session. So my first speaker today, and the theme is employability and entrepreneurship. And our first speaker is Dr. Mafophi Israel Adegboya. She's from the IFC World Bank, and I'm just, her little bio is in your book. I'm not going to read it other than to say she's currently an education specialist with the World Bank International Finance. So I think the speaker is online. I'm asking very warm welcome to our online speaker, and we look forward to listening to what you have to tell us around the employability and entrepreneurship. So could we have that, our speaker, is it pre-recorded? No, she's online, so warm welcome. And there we go. Over to you, ma'am, and I'm going to give you 15 minutes, 15. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Not sure if you can hear me.
I think everybody in the room can hear you. Thank you.
I do have slides I can't share at the moment, so admin, maybe you can share on that side, that would be great.
Are you needing your slides, the PowerPoint slides?